to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 So we are reading this morning from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 21, Conversation between Manu and Kardama. And today we are reading verse 18. Shall we do the verse responsively? What do you think? Na te jaraksha Brahmir Ayur Esham Trayodasharam Tri Shatam Shashti Parva Shan Nemi Ananta Chadi Yat Tri Nabhi Karala Sroto Jagad Achidya Davat Nate Jaraksha Brahmir Ayur Aesham Trayodasharam Trishatam Shashti Parva Shanem Yananta Chadiyatri Nabhi Karala Sroto Jagad Achidya Davat Nate Jaraksha Brahmir Ayur Esham Trayodasharam Trishatam Shashti Parva Shanem Yananta Chadiyatri Nabhi Karala Sroto Jagadachitya Davat Nate Jaraksha Brahmir Ayur Esham Trayodasharam Trishatam Shashti Parva Shanem Yananta Chadiyatri Nabhi Karala Sroto Jagad Achidya Davat Jaraksha Brahmir Ayur Esham Trayodasharam Trishatam Shashti Parva Shanem Yananta Chadiyatrinapi Karala Sroto Jagat Achitya Davat
Chayodirashram Shri Satam Sasti Bhava Sanaminanta Chadiyachinabi Karela Shroto Jagadachidyavat
Karala Sroto Jagadachitya Davat Nateja Raksha Brahmir Ayuresham Trayodasharam Trishatam Shasti Parva Shane Minanta Chadiyatrinapi Karala Sroto Jagadachitya Davat. Any ladies? No? That's okay. Nateja Raksha Brahmi Aira Esham Chayodasharam Trishatam Shashti Parva Shane Minanta Chadiyatrinapi Karala Karala Sroto Jagadachitya Davat Na not Te your Ajara of imperishable Brahman Aksha on the axle Brahmi rotating Ayu span of life Esham of the devotees Trayodasha 13 Aram spokes Trishatam 300 Shashti 60 Parva functions Shat 6 Name rims Ananta innumerable Chadi leaves Yat which Tree 3 Nabhi naves Karala Shota with tremendous velocity Jagat the universe Achidya cutting short Davat running. Translation: your wheel, which has 3 naves, rotates around the axis of the imperishable Brahman. It has 13 spokes, 360 joints, 6 rims, and numberless leaves carved upon it. Though its revolution cuts short the lifespan of the entire creation, this wheel of tremendous velocity cannot touch the lifespan of the devotees of the Lord. Interesting. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The time factor cannot affect the span of life of the devotees. In Bhagavad Gita it is stated that a little execution of devotional service saves one from the greatest danger. The greatest danger is transmigration of the soul from one body to another. And only devotional service to the Lord can stop this process. It is stated in the Vedic literatures, Harim vina na mritim taranti. Without the mercy of the Lord, one cannot stop the cycle of birth and death. In Bhagavad Gita it is stated that only by understanding the transcendental nature of the Lord and his activities, his appearance and disappearance, can one stop the cycle of birth and death and go back to him. The time factor is divided into many fractions of moments, hours, months, years, periods, seasons, etc. All the divisions in this verse are determined according to the astronomical calculations of Vedic literature. There are 6 seasons called ritus. And there is the period of 4 months called Chatur Masya. 3 periods of 4 months complete 1 year. According to Vedic astronomical calculations, there are 13 months. The 13th month is called Adimas or Malamas and is added every 3rd year. The time factor, however, cannot touch the lifespan of the devotees. In another verse it is stated that when the sun rises and sets, it takes away the life of all living entities, but it cannot take away the life of those who are engaged in devotional service. Time is compared here to a big wheel which has 360 joints, 6 rims in the shape of seasons, and numberless leaves in the shape of moments. It rotates on the eternal existence, Brahman. Na teja raksha brahmir ayur esham, trayodasha ram trishatam shashti parava, shannemyananta chariyatri nabi, karala shroto jagad achitya davat. Your wheel, which has 3 naves, rotates around the axis of the imperishable Brahman. It has 13 spokes, 360 joints, 6 rims, and numberless leaves carved upon it. Though its revolution cuts short the lifespan of the entire creation, this wheel of tremendous velocity cannot touch the lifespan of the devotees of the Lord. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadesh Tarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakavatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Let's just have a look here. What is a name? I should know, but oh, I see. It's part of Christianity. The central and principal part of a Christian church, extending from the entrance to the area in front of the altar. Yeah. Right. Okay. Interesting. So, yes, this is Kardama Muni again, addressing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and this is quite a different type of point he's addressing. He's addressing the point of time, how time works, and how time, you could say, it harasses the living entities. It's constantly moving on. No sooner are you in one time, but the time changes, and with it your situation. So he has described time and the functioning of time in terms of a wheel, except for the nave. Well, I don't know. Anyway, your wheel, which has 3 naves. I'm not exactly sure what the idea is of the 3 naves, although the other parts are, clearer. It has, so this wheel of time has 13 spokes. That's interesting, isn't it? A spoke in this context is a month. So, did you know that a year has 13 months? You thought it had 12 months, didn't you?
Yeah.
Just see. You learned something new. The thing is, the Vedic literatures follow the lunar calendar, not the solar calendar. Yeah. So, the thing about the lunar calendar is, if you know what you're looking for, then you can, without having to look in a newspaper, look in a printed calendar, listen, ask someone, or hear on the radio or television or the internet, you can just know. You can just walk outside your residence, look at the moon, and you know what day it is. That's convenient, isn't it? Otherwise, you've got to have a big computer like this, and then you can see, oh, look, yeah, it's Thursday. So, yeah, the Vedic literature and the whole Vedic tradition works on the basis of 13 months. 360 days in a year. That's what's said here, 360 joints. But, if we simply stuck to that, we would find our calendar would get out of, what's the word? It would not synchronize with the, like the seasons, or the years. Every year you'd lose 5 or so days, because there's only 360 days in the lunar, Well, in 12 months of a lunar calendar, so you got an extra 5 or 6 days. What to do with them? Interesting question. Well, you make a special year, a special month every 3rd year, 4th year, every now and then, 3rd or 4th year. And you sort of just adopt that as a special month. And so therefore we see in our Vedic calendars, our Krishna conscious calendars, if you look on the internet, then you'll see, you can find all these calendars, there's a number of them, lunar calendars, and every three years basically, or every 4th year or something like that, there's this extra month just appears. It wasn't in last year or the year before. It's not going to be in next year, but this year it is. And this is called, well, here, Prabhupada uses the Sanskrit, the Adhi Mas, or Mala Mas. Yes. So what do we call it? Adik, yeah. But what do we call it generally? That month? Purushottam. It's the month of Purushottam. Yes. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, but a special form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So just for background, the sake of background information, although I imagine most or many of you are familiar with this, you've been around when there's been a month of Purushottam month, and you've heard the story, I'm sure you have. But anyway, just to sort of complete the picture presented here, when that extra month comes, well, what happened was, there's sort of a, Puranic story, I forget which Purana it's from, but it's there, so it is authentic, that the months are alive. They're people. The months are people. And there's 12 of the regular months every single year. They are there. But then there was this extra period of time. So there was this extra month, but it was kind of not taken very seriously by the other months, because it's not there every year. It's just every now and then it's there. And when it's there, it's not like a full month, a 30-day or so, or 28-day actually, month. It's just, it just fills in, actually. It fills in. So the story goes that month was sort of not completely rejected, but just treated as something. Well, Malamas means, oh, Krishna. Oh my God, my assistant is not here. Yeah, Malamas means like the rejected month or the contaminated month, like that. Yes. So, yeah, they would laugh, they would make fun of that month and abuse, you could say, verbally abuse that month. Hare Krishna. our doctor has arrived. I was told you'd gone back to Johannesburg. I was told because I wanted to meet with you about, maybe we can do it today, about my stitches. Is that okay? Anyway, okay. So, yeah. So that Mala Mas, that rejected month, was not happy. Was very distressed, being treated offensively and unpleasantly by the personalities of the other months. So what to do? It's a bit of a long story. She went to the Supreme Personality of Godhead eventually and presented her plea, can you help me to, become properly situated and thereby taken seriously? And the Lord felt very compassionate, because the Lord is very compassionate, and particularly when he sees that a devotee approaches in a humble mood, the Lord becomes very compassionate. Devotees may approach in all sorts of different moods. People approach in all sorts of different moods the Lord. But it depends on the mood. I remember in distributing books in London in 1973, would you believe, 51 years ago, I stopped this young man. He looked like a hippie, and we would always approach the hippies, and because they were always open to Krishna consciousness. This one wasn't. He looked the part, but he was not the part. And he just became extremely arrogant when I tried to distribute a book to him. And he declared to me, I am God. After a while of meeting the odd, arrogant person, and even people who claim to be God, I developed a few sort of quick responses to kind of put them in their place a bit. Like, look at you. Do you think you'd make a good God? How about controlling the universe, controlling the weather? Are you doing that? Because in London the weather's almost, a lot of the time it's bad. Can you please make the weather better? No response. Anyway, but the Mala Mas, at the time called the Mala Mas, the rejected, unclean month, approached very humbly. And so the Lord became very compassionate and said, yes, not only will I give you a place, but I will adopt you as my month, my special month, even more special than all the regular months. And therefore the month is called Purushottam month, the month of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And it's added every third year, and it's a bit complicated. You'd have to look through the Vedic calendar over some decades to see what happens with that month, because sometimes it's interrupted, then it starts again in the same year. It's all a bit extraordinary. So anyway, the thing is, the actual point which is being got at here by Karadama Muni and in the purport by Srila Prabhupada is that even though the time factor is there with all its divisions and subdivisions, 6 seasons, then a special period of 4 months called Chaturmasya, and so on, including this 13th month, Mala Mas Purushota month, which is added every third year. When's the next one, do you know?
I think last year.
I think it was last year, was the last one. So the next one's going to be, a couple of years from now, 3 years or so. But the point is, and this is the point, and this is just really what an important point, that the time factor cannot touch the lifespan of the devotees. And Prabhupada refers to another verse in Srimad Bhagavatam, earlier in Srimad Bhagavatam. It's better known, I would say, at least I think it's better known, I know it better than this verse. This verse says that by rising and setting, the sun reduces the lifespan of every living entity except the devotees. So, now of course we got to understand that properly. It doesn't mean that these, awkward and difficult material bodies that we have are just going to live forever. And in this way, just the time factor will not touch our material bodies. The bad news, or maybe it's good news, is that the time factor will definitely touch our material bodies. Are you also a doctor?
I'm not, but I'm from London.
I know. I remember going to your place. You're in the financial field, yeah. So anyway, yes, so the time factor definitely touches the material bodies of the devotees. Otherwise, if we took it in that sense, that the time factor cannot touch the material bodies, our material bodies, then we would expect our material bodies to just live on indefinitely or actually forever. But the bad or good news, whichever way you look at it, is that we're all here temporarily. And you can, I read actually not long ago, just this year, in some news report or even a few, that there are some very wealthy people who are trying to extend the lifespans of their material bodies by doing special blood transplants. I don't know if you've read about that. Special blood transplants and things like that, which allow the tissues of the body to not deteriorate so fast. And in this way, their idea is to extend, and ultimately the idea is to just extend forever the lifespans of these material bodies. But I remember, I can see, looking at this very body here, it's only 72 years old. It's not that old. The average life expectancy is somewhere around 80, at least in the Western countries. It becomes progressively more challenging to manage the material body. It breaks down, or different parts of it break down, or sort of partially break down and need attention. Yeah. And sooner or later the whole thing just gives in. And even these people who are trying to extend their lives indefinitely, it's not going to work. And one thing, my mother, Hare Krishna, bless her, she helped me financially in Krishna consciousness, at least, if nothing else. But she passed away at the age of 92. She was she was 92. But she was living a life not worth living. She was, she became senile. My poor old mother. The last time I visited her, I would go every year, for many years. The last time I was there, she had this thing, she'd always lose her keys. Not lose them, but forget where she put them. She'd go out to do something. Actually, she went for a walk every day, and she did some other things occasionally. And she'd come back and put the keys down for her apartment and forget where they were, and just go into such a stressed condition. Oh my gosh, so anxious. Where are the keys? Where are the keys? And eventually, after some time, she'd find them, and it would be like, oh, what a relief. And that was the least of it, actually. So, yeah, as the body, particularly like these people are trying to extend the lifetime of the body. So you know what that means ultimately, at least, and a very important part of what that means, is they're going to extend the period of the body breaking down and being painful, and the mind, usually the mind, even if you don't actually become senile, but your mental capabilities reduce. For everyone, basically. Even if you maintain a fairly stable type of consciousness, but your mental capabilities reduce. Yeah, and the pain increases, and the things keep breaking down, and stay in broken down conditions longer. And like this, sure, they don't know what they're doing. They think they're doing something very clever, but actually in the end it's going to be detrimental. Like I said, my mother was living a life that was not worth living, actually. It was pathetic, beyond pathetic. Yeah. And it was more trying and difficult for her than she could tolerate. So what does this mean then? That the Karadama says, this wheel of tremendous velocity, the wheel of time, cannot touch the lifespan of the devotees of the Lord. What does this mean? This is referring to not just the body, because the devotee, no body is their body. The body is just like an appendage or some extra thing connected with the actual person. Yes, so the actual person is the eternal spirit soul, the eternal devotee. So if we cultivate our Krishna consciousness as nicely as we're able, or really try to cultivate our Krishna consciousness and really get into it, then we will come to the eternal platform. Ultimately, that's what will happen. We will come to the platform of realizing objectively that we're actually not these bodies, and that we are actually eternal persons, and therefore we are actually not touched by death. I mention every now and then how Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur talks about, it's in Madhurya Kadambini, which is sort of available, it's around. Devotees have access to it. So he talks about the devotee on the level of Krishna prema, the highest exalted level of pure Krishna consciousness and vivid realization of reality as opposed to unreality. And this devotee, of course, there are different levels of Krishna prema actually. And even the level of bhava, which is prior to Krishna prema, is actually an aspect of Krishna prema, but it has some differences from the sort of classical state of Krishna prema. Therefore it's separated and given another title, but actually it's Krishna prema in a quite undeveloped state. So in the very high levels of Krishna prema, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that the devotee becomes so detached from the body. Well, the example is given of a coconut maturing. First of all, you get the green coconut growing on the tree, and if you just leave it to grow, then after some time, because those of you who have been to Mayapur, or even here now you can get green coconuts where you cut off the top and you can drink. There is coconut liquid inside, which is quite nice and good for the health. Generally, at least it's publicized as being good for the health. And that all over a period of time dries up inside. It just dries up completely. This is when the coconut stops being green and becomes brown, in that state. And then the water evaporates or somehow or other disperses, so there's no liquid in there. But there is a layer of, let us use the word flesh inside, which as the liquid becomes removed, dries up, and as it dries up, because the liquid's not there, so the liquid part goes and the solid part reduces in size, and it separates from the shell. And such a coconut, you can shake it and you'll hear this thing rattling inside. So in the very advanced stage of Krishna consciousness, this is what actually happens to the devotee, in the sense that the spiritual body, which is compared to that sort of flesh, whatever you might call it, inside, eventually, at first, like now, we're practicing Krishna consciousness, and we've heard how many times we're not these bodies. But the actual realization, meaning realization of it, that in fact we're actually not this body or part of it, and we have no real relationship with it. In our states, it's more intellectual and understanding and type of acceptance, but eventually it actually happens, but it's only in the very advanced stage. So anyway, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur says that the very advanced devotee on the very advanced level of Krishna prema becomes totally aware, and it's just objectively a fact that he's actually not the body. So he says then that such a devotee, in some cases, not always, but in some cases, when the external body dies, which is like the shell of the coconut, when the external body dies, the devotee may not notice it, because the devotee is separate like physically separate from the shell, like we are physically separate from our clothes, etc. So the devotee is physically separated from the body, and when the body just falls down and is finished, the elevated devotee who's just absorbed in Krishna, in service to Krishna and in love for Krishna, and just completely, totally focused on Krishna with no interest whatsoever in the body, the devotee may not notice it. But after a while, the devotee may realize, hey, where did my material body go? Hey, what happened? And then he or she realizes, oh, it must have died. Because they're in their spiritual body, which is them. We are actually our spiritual bodies. Yes, so that whole experience of being directly with Krishna and being in our real state is such a compelling experience that the experience of the material body is just forgotten just like that, because it's of no significance, it's of no reality in terms of who we really are. And actually the history of the material body is basically a history of just bad news, just bad memories. I think we've all had some bad experiences in life, and often we have some, well, if or when we have a bad experience, we feel, I want to forget about that. Just want to forget about it. So the devotee feels like that. I just want to forget about my body and what I went through. Oh, what I went through with this material body. The pain, the discomfort, being in hospital. And Prabhupada was in hospital one time, and devotees came to visit him. He was in sort of like a general ward, and the person next to him had been in a serious car accident, and arms and legs were broken. So the limbs, some of the limbs were up. They do that. So he's sort of like this, suspended, lying on the bed. And the relatives would come, and you know what people are like. The first thing they'd ask is, how are you? It's just an official nicety. It's not like we're really interested. Well, how are you actually? Interesting little point in Russia. And in India actually, there's no culture of asking people how they are when you meet them. You only ask when it's relevant to ask. Yeah. So if you ask someone, at least I've done it in Russia, ask them, how are you? And they will give you a description of how they are. Because they feel that's what you want to know. It's not like in South Africa, how are you? Fine. It's a standard answer. So Prabhupada was amused when this fellow who was in like a plaster cast of practically most of his body, relatives came in and asked how he was. How poor taste could that be? But he answered, fine. It's just crazy. And actually Prabhupada once was asked by a reporter, how are you? And Prabhupada answered, what does it matter to you how I am? If I was in a very bad state, would it matter to you? No. So it's just a formality. So anyway, the eternal devotee is not affected by the rotations of the wheel of time or the rising and setting of the sun. Particularly the advanced devotee, and as even we, as we advance, hopefully step by step onwards, these things will be less important to us. But rather the reality of our lives will be our relationship with Krishna, engaging in service to the Lord. And then for the advanced devotees, when the death of the body comes, even if they're not on that level like Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur talks about, but at least the devotee can be on the level of Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, verse 13. What's that? Dehinos vinyata dehe kumaram yovanam jara tatade hantara praptya dhiras tatra na muyati. The dhira, the sober person, means like the serious devotee is not bewildered by the change of body. The devotee may, be affected to some degree by the pain of it. It may be, another unpleasant experience, but the devotee is not bewildered by it. It's one thing being affected by some negative experience. It's another thing just being overwhelmed by it. So you lose your ability to function rationally. So yes, devotees on the level of nishta, on the level of ruchi, these types of levels, hopefully, if they really focus in Krishna consciousness, when the time of death inevitably comes, they won't be overwhelmed by it and they won't just sort of lose it, as happens generally with non-devotees. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Any comments or questions? Yes.
Is there time in the spiritual world?
There's a type of time, meaning there's night, there's day, so like that. But that time is just a background or facility for Krishna's pastimes. Like sometimes he's going to dance with the gopis, so the night becomes longer, so they can dance longer. Yes. Yeah, so like that. It's flexible. And it's a background or a facility for Krishna's pastimes. And nothing deteriorates. Nothing. It has no detrimental effect on anything in any way. Yes, sir.
Does that fall normally into Purushottam months?
No. It's before usually. It's coming up. I forget when. It's May. Huh? 10th of May? Could well be. Anyway, it's there, I'm sure, in the calendar. But Purushottam's usually a bit later. Closer to Kartik, sort of, like that. Yes, Prabhu.
You talked about there's a situation in life sometimes whereby the body just resets, right? You forget almost everything, you forget almost your identity fully. Now for devotees, and where it could happen to us, so whether it's dealing with others or where it could even be ourselves, how do we think about it in a situation where spiritual life is meant to progressively being more and more absorbed in Krishna? And that's the ashrams, then moving into Vanaprastha. But where we could be potentially subject to this, also, which is very possible, forgetting the one thing which we've been trying to absorb ourselves our whole life in, which is Krishna. Do we think about it in the context of this is maybe just karma and this is what's meant to happen? Or is it the detaching of the malai and the coconut where we just can't, we might externally seem like, oh, this person is not as absorbed in Krishna, but actually it's the detaching of that and we just can't see it. So when we observe it, and it could happen to us, how do we think about that situation for devotees?
Yes, that's an interesting subject which has been and is being discussed by, even on the GBC body, what to do with senior devotees who go through, that type of deterioration. Generally it doesn't happen so much with devotees, but you ask many, like very senior devotees, and they'll tell you, my memory is not as good as it used to be, which is almost, as I understand, kind of universal when people reach a certain age. But I would say that if we notice that sort of deterioration in ourselves, or if others point it out to us, we should then, because Krishna is the source of knowledge, remembrance and forgetfulness, we should take it as like a wake-up call from Krishna. And really make an effort, a greater effort, particularly with our chanting, which is like food for the consciousness. It'll strengthen our consciousness. So it can be like a sign that you're not really chanting as much as, or as well as you could or should. So come on, get into it. I haven't seen a devotee, I know many devotees who are old, but I haven't seen any who are, what's the word actually? Well, senile, but there's like in a state of dementia, that sort of thing. But I saw it in my mother, poor old mother, and just into like this crazy world.
Sometimes we see actually the opposite, where people forget everything except for Krishna.
Well, yes. There was one devotee here, Shamlal Prabhu. He was actually born in Navadvip, and he was very close. He had a very close relationship with Srila Prabhupada, disciple of Prabhupada. And he had got brain cancer, big tumor somewhere like in his head, and that affected him. The first time I noticed it, I went to one devotee's place and a few other devotees, there was some of us coming for lunch, so there we were, and there he was, and I hadn't seen him for like 6 months. So I asked him, so we're sitting next to each other, and he turns to me and says, "Please forgive me for my offenses." And I said, "Yes, of course there are no offenses, but if there were, I forgive." About 2 minutes later, "Please forgive me for my offenses." And he asked me probably at least 20 times over the space of half an hour or 40 minutes or so. But, it was directly, it wasn't just a psychological malfunction, it was physical malfunction of the brain. And eventually, whenever I'd see him, not often, because he lived on for like maybe a year. They gave him 2 months or something, but he lived on. And whenever I'd see him, he'd always say something Krishna conscious, really Krishna conscious. The next time I saw him, I remember, he was endlessly repeating the first line or verse of the song about Lord Chaitanya, Yadi Gora Nahoite, something. If Lord Chaitanya had not come, but he adapted it if Prabhupada had not come. And it's just going on And then a couple of minutes, and again and again and again. And finally he was hospitalized. And like for some months, I think about 3, he was in a coma. But the medical insurance paid for him to be in a good hospital. And one day, he was there and one of his daughters was there. And one nurse, a white lady, was there. He was Bengali. And he's just, in a coma. Suddenly sat up. Hare Krishna! And that was it, gone, on the spot. And the white nurse, who knows nothing about these things, she was really taken aback. And I didn't go, I was not around, but some other devotees went shortly after. And the white nurse said, yeah, what happened was amazing. I couldn't believe it. He just said that little prayer that you say, and that was it.
At the time of death, it's told that Lord Chaitanya Prabhu forces himself in the mind to be advanced.
Yes. Well, that's there. Prabhupada would say that when devotees would ask, what happens at the time of death if you lose consciousness, and which is pretty common. Our doctor would know that you lose consciousness and you just sort of drift away, and then they notice, oh look, heart stopped beating. The machines reflect that. But yes, Prabhupada did say that if at the time of death you can't control your mind to focus on Krishna for any reason, then Lord Chaitanya may come or will come and force his way into your mind. Therefore it's always best to be a devotee, and it's always best to try our best and not sort of drift off into spaced out types of consciousness. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah.